The exploration ship drifted silently through the void, its hull reflecting the light of a distant red star. Inside, Commander Raylan adjusted his oxygen mask, watching the readouts flicker on the console. The mission had taken years to prepare, a deep space voyage to a newly discovered exoplanet within the habitable zone of its star system. Scientists back on Earth speculated that it could sustain life, though the nature of that life remained unknown. Raylan had seen many wonders in the galaxy, but nothing prepared him for what he encountered upon stepping foot on the surface of Zelari 7. The planet's atmosphere was dense, a swirling mix of gaseous compounds unbreathable to a human. The ship's scanners had detected biological activity, but the forms were elusive, shifting like mirages. The terrain was a mixture of bioluminescent flora and towering crystalline structures that pulsed with an eerie glow. Raylan, suited up in his protective gear, moved cautiously, his boots pressing into the spongy ground. His helmet display indicated movement nearby, and his pulse quickened. Was he about to make first contact? Then a figure emerged from behind a translucent pillar. It was humanoid, tall and slender, with skin that shimmered like liquid silver under the planet's light. Her large eyes studied him, curiosity and wariness flickering in their depths. She wore a form-fitting suit, a device clamped over her face, resembling a breathing apparatus. Raylan raised his hand slowly, a universal sign of peace. The being mirrored his gesture, then spoke in a voice both melodic and sharp. His suit's translator struggled for a moment before rendering her words into English. "You can breathe oxygen?" she exclaimed, her tone filled with astonishment. Raylan blinked, caught off guard. Oxygen was the fundamental building block of Earth's atmosphere, but here it seemed to be an anomaly. He hesitated before nodding. "Yes, my species requires it to survive." The alien girl's eyes widened. "Impossible," she murmured. "Oxygen is corrosive, deadly. We use filtration to extract only what we need." Raylan processed this revelation, fascinated. If oxygen was toxic to her kind, then their biochemistry must be radically different. "Then what do you breathe?" he asked, curiosity overriding caution. She gestured to the air around them, a mix of elements primarily xenon and argon. Oxygen, in its raw form, would burn us from within. The implications were staggering. Two intelligent species, evolved in opposite conditions, standing face to face. And yet, here they were, communicating, learning from each other. Over the following days, Raylan and the alien, who introduced herself as Lirian, began exchanging knowledge. Lirian's people, the Zelari, had built a sprawling underground civilization beneath the planet's surface, thriving in the rich gaseous environment their bodies required. Their technology was unparalleled in energy manipulation, but their fear of oxygen had limited their expansion beyond their planet's atmosphere. Raylan, in turn, shared humanity's journey, how they had tamed the elements, ventured beyond their homeworld, and adapted to the vast, often hostile, cosmos. Lirian was fascinated but remained skeptical. How can your kind exist in such conditions? Wouldn't prolonged exposure to other gases weaken you? It can, Raylan admitted, but we adapt. We've built suits and domes, altered our bodies when necessary. Survival is part of our nature. Lirian's gaze softened, her analytical mind turning over his words. Perhaps, she mused, our people have feared the unknown for too long. Their interactions did not go unnoticed. The Zelari leadership was divided. Some viewed Raylan as a curiosity, others as a threat. His mere presence, breathing what they considered a dangerous element, unsettled them. And when he removed his mask in Lirian's presence to prove his resilience, the act was met with both awe and horror. But Lirian was undeterred. She saw in Raylan the promise of something greater: collaboration, understanding, unity. Together, they set out to bridge the divide between their species, challenging the long-held fears that had kept their worlds apart. As days turned to weeks, Raylan and Lirian worked side by side, unraveling the secrets of their biologies, their cultures. The Zelari had long believed that exposure to even trace amounts of oxygen was lethal, but Raylan demonstrated otherwise. Small, controlled experiments with volunteers showed that adaptation was possible, that their fears had been rooted in outdated knowledge rather than absolute truth. However, not everyone was willing to embrace change. A faction within the Zelari, fearing contamination, sought to expel Raylan from their world. They saw his presence as a risk, a destabilizing force that could lead to unforeseen consequences. As tensions reached a breaking point, an environmental crisis struck. A sudden tectonic shift released pockets of previously trapped oxygen into the underground cities. Panic ensued, but Raylan and Lirian acted swiftly. Using technology adapted from both their worlds, they stabilized the air composition, preventing mass casualties. It was a turning point. In the aftermath, the Zelari Council convened. Raylan stood before them not as a threat, but as an ally. Lirian spoke in his defense, advocating for a future where their species worked together rather than in fear of one another. In the end, progress won over fear. A new era dawned for both civilizations. And as Raylan prepared to depart, leaving behind the foundations of an alliance, Lirian promised they would meet again. Perhaps, one day, on a world where both species could breathe freely, side by side. Months later, Raylan's ship returned to Earth, but his heart remained tethered to Zelari 7. He spent his days working with the best minds of his world, crafting solutions for a future where humanity and the Zelari could coexist. Lirian, in turn, fought to reshape her people's beliefs, urging them to see past fear and embrace the unknown. Their journey was far from over, but as long as they continued to push forward, the dream of unity remained within reach, a beacon of hope in the endless cosmos.